If you had 24 hours with me and I couldn't say no, what would we do?
Move! It's finally here. The answer to the age-old question of what would happen if this guy and this thing had a baby, and then that baby bought some jewelry. Emblem Micaiah came out a little while ago, and she's certainly the cleanser of all time. Until Freyr gets his refine. But we're here today to talk about her emblem ring specifically. So, her ring does quite a few things. To start off, it has the special damage boost that every emblem ring has, unless your name is... Yes, the pure support emblem ring gets boosted damage, but these guys don't. IS, please just patch these rings to establish a real baseline. Anyways, the real effects of the ring include self-refreshing after using a rally or movement assist, restoring 20 HP to only the target ally while also fully cleansing them, and then you also inflict isolation on yourself. The only other drawback is that if you're a ranged unit, you also inflict gravity on yourself. All that's to say that this ring doesn't really do that many things, but what it does do is very, very strong in the current metagame. Self-refreshing goes without saying as being strong, but mid-turn cleansing, let alone full cleansing, even if it's just on one target, is an absolutely top-tier effect. Especially since support units haven't had that many emblem ring choices in the past. But alright, let's get to what you clicked on the video for, the unit recommendations. The units I'll be recommending in this video are going to be split into 3 different categories, with an extra one for honorable mentions at the end. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Hey, want to listen to some tunes?
Alright, so the first category of unit I want to bring attention to is the anti-warp, mainly barricade-esque unit. And the first unit I want to talk about is Rearmed Nell. So if you're unfamiliar with Barricade, basically it's just anti-warp, and then defense res +4, and neutralizing your penalties to defense and res during combat for both you and your allies within 3. And within 3 is really important these days because that lets you get out of the range of certain debuffs like Assigned Decoy from Tree Man in Dark Season. So you're still able to position yourself to support your allies, while also being out of that range. Very important. Barricade is a very, very strong skill, but Nell specifically also comes with a preference A slot in Protective, and not really crazy. It's mostly combat, but in that first paragraph at the top, you can see that she basically inflicts Omni -5 and also neutralizes foes' bonuses during combat, for just existing. That complements Barricade very nicely because Barricade neutralizes your penalties and Protective neutralizes the foe's bonuses. So having both sides of the spectrum covered just for existing is very, very nice support. But the thing that's really nice about these dragon units with Barricade is that they're typically bulky and can fight, while also being there to support with the anti-warp. And Edge Scales kind of ties all of this together very nicely as far as a speedy dragon support with Barricade, because it gives you more true damage, it gives you flat DR, it gives you full NFU, and it gives you 10 points of Frozen. All that is to say that you can position this unit within 2 or 3 depending on the team that you're fighting, giving out anti-warp, giving out neutralized penalties, giving out neutralized bonuses on the enemy, Omni -5, but then if an enemy actually breaks through, whether they have pass or whatnot, you can actually fight because Edge Scales provide so much combat power, and Arcane Fell Arts is actually one of the best rearmed weapons we've gotten so far. Really, really solid unit. Her Perf A actually has a lot of nice combat stuff as well. Like, this unit's good. So a unit like this is very valuable in an Omni-Tank-centric team, especially in Aether raids where you want to buff your primary tank while also protecting your allies with the anti-war. So, when you put Micaiah Ring on a unit like this, you basically are able to maneuver your tank into position, you cleanse them, you heal them, etc., and then you refresh yourself and position within 2 or 3, depending on what team you're fighting, and then you provide the Barricade and other support while also being a very strong body for stuff that can get through. It's very, very good. Nell is a very solid unit. However, pretty much 90% of the reason this unit is good is not her A slot, it is the rest of the fodder. And since she is a rearmed unit, that means you can just give it out for free, and this leads me, unsurprisingly, to the best user of this fodder. So, Winter Allure is one of those units that kind of flew under the radar when they came out, and that's mainly because their combat with their base kit was pretty underwhelming. Like, the weapon is okay, and they came with Dragon Roar and Miracle and all that stuff, but the B and the C slot left a lot to be desired, and the A slot wasn't power crept, even though Mail has been out for quite a while now. And if you've been keeping up with the game, we just got our third Haythrune with a third different C slot. So, yeah. Anyway, this unit didn't have the best reception when they came out, justifiably so. However, with the advent of Nell, and like I said, she is a rearmed unit, you were able to put what makes that unit good onto a better unit at its cap. So Edge Scales and Barricade really bring this unit together. Like, it is a true zero to hero situation. This unit is insane with this fodder. They can box with the best of them, legitimately, except like Camilla. But other than that, this unit can actually tank. So you have the anti-warp, you're able to tank for anything that gets through, and also do like really good damage because this is a brave unit. You have Miracle, so if they don't have Fatal Smoke, it's even harder to actually get through. But the really strong thing about this unit is the Divinely Inspiring status, which is a handful of stats, but also special jump of up to 2, and then healing per hit, which is like up to 8. And being able to give anybody you want a special jump of 2 is really, really nice. But once again, you really want to use these barricade supports that are also bodies to support your Omni-Tank team. They are very much a secondary tank to get through. And once again, since you're trying to support an Omni-Tank, the handful of stats and up to 8 healing per hit is actually really, really nice. Tanks want every point of stats that they can get, and obviously tanks want to heal. Good status for them, and once again, Miracle in the A slot makes it so it's even harder to get through. The flat DR, NFU, the frozen, extra true damage, everything under the sun, like I said, zero to hero when you put the Nell fodder on this unit. If you're able to do this, one of my highest recommendations. So now we get to the duo skill, which is another reason this unit is way higher value than a unit like Nell. The access to a duo button, and even on defense having one of your bodies be a duo unit so you have access to duo's hindrance, very important. Anyway, the duo button is actually a 3-range cleanse, full cleanse. And also, like Nell's A slot, it neutralizes foes' bonuses during combat, and then as an added effect, 50% DR shred, which is nice. So, there is a bit of overlap with the Micaiah ring because they both do a full cleanse, but it's okay because the duo button, if you're mainly going to use this to support a tank in ARO, you're not always going to be able to just instantly do your duo button whenever you want. Because like I said, if the enemy team is good and they have a duo unit, they have access to duo's hindrance, which means you have to get rid of all the duo units or the structure before you can press your duo button. So, you're still getting value from the cleanse of the Micaiah ring. And even if you could press the duo button whenever you want, it would still be valuable to have the Micaiah ring because you can save the cleanse from the duo skill if you only need to cleanse one person. Because the Micaiah ring only cleanses the target, this duo skill cleanses the unit and everybody within 3 fully. So, yeah. Anyway, I can't say enough good things about this unit, in parentheses with the Nell fodder, and these barricade type units with the really high speed, NFU, true damage that can actually box, while also being anti-warp beacons and all that other stuff. I cannot recommend them enough. If you have the Nell fodder, which is available in the Divine Codes this year, I would highly recommend it. Very, very strong. So the last anti-warp dragon that I want to talk about is actually legendary Myrrh, who got a refine recently. And she is known for her warp bubble, but her refined C slot makes it so she gives out warp bubble on both phases now. And instead of it being anti-warp for just existing like barricade, it is a status that she gives out on top of defense res +6, foe can't make a follow-up, and neutralizes effective against flying. Okay, and also Bulwark. And Bulwark is really, really nice to give out, once again, if you're using this to support an Omni-Tank. And this is also to everybody within 3. So Myrrh, unlike the barricade tanks that I was talking about before, not fast. However, her refine makes it so she can actually tank quite a bit. It's not the worst. And like Nell in her refine, the first paragraph of her refine, she actually has some 3x3 support just for existing, which includes an Omni -5 and 50% DR shred. Not bad for just existing. So if Myrrh is one of your favorites, you have her merged up for Arena, or even if you have a one-off like I do, and just want to use her when it's wind season in ARO as a solid anti-warp option while also giving out bulwark, like I said, all that other stuff that comes with this unit, and then having the bonus of cleansing and healing your tank, I think it's a very good option. However, there's one more unit that I want to talk about, and it might be controversial.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
GK? Get the fuck out of here. I'm talking about GK today. Yes, I am recommending Big Gatekeeper in the year of our Savior 2025. I know. However, it's not for the reason that you think. It is not because he has warping that is better than other units. It's not because he has combat that is better than other units. It's not because his base kit has better support than other units. It is literally just because his anti-warp resides in the B slot as opposed to the C slot, like every other example that I've listed and most other examples in the game. And the C slot is home to pretty much every supportive skill that's inheritable in the game. So you have the anti-warp in the B always, which frees up your C slot to run stuff like Infantry No Follow-Up, any flavor of Ploy, because this unit does have a pretty beefy res stat if you pump enough visible into it from the A and the S. Breath of Life, one of the staple builds on this character. There's so much flexibility in this unit because the warping resides in the B slot, and I really want to stress that. But on top of having anti-warp in the B slot, it also has bulwark built in, and this unit can unironically tank some secondary threats because he has a decent amount of flat DR in the weapon and like pretty chunky visible defenses. Like, he's not the worst guy in the world when it comes to combat. So you have warp and bulwark in the B, frees up your C slot, really nice for flexibility, but then the weapon itself has Omni +5 and 7 healing to all your allies within 3x3 just for existing. So decent combat support there. It ain't no special jump, it ain't no flat DR or anything like that, but it's okay. Just personally speaking, the flexibility of having your C slot open compared to almost every other anti-warp unit, having that taken up by Barricade or a Preference C, is worth talking about. So, I would highly recommend putting the Micaiah ring on this unit to further bolster his support with cleansing and healing and all that stuff. Really solid. Alright, so finally hopping into the game, I have the Micaiah ring on Alir as an example, and basically all you want to do, if you have it on a unit like this, you just move your tank into position, you refresh yourself, you cleanse, you heal them, they're all good, and then if they have Tree Man, you can move within 3, and then still have that barricade support. But if they don't have that and you're safe to put it within 2, you can either put it right here or here, and you have the anti-warp setup, while also being in range for something like Divinely Inspiring, which this unit specifically does. So now you have your Omni tank of choice, fully cleansed, protected with anti-warp, unless they have something like Pass, obviously, and all the stat and effects that Barricade brings, and then if something like Pass gets through, you have a pretty beefy Barricade unit able to tank. This is a pretty straightforward example, but yeah. So to summarize what we want to look for in an anti-warp unit with the Micaiah ring, there are a few things. Number 1, generally have some kind of support that you can give out for existing. Duo Alir, Divinely Inspiring, Nell's A slot, Gatekeeper's everything, and the list goes on for you to experiment with. Number 2, being a secondary tank. Especially if you're a Barricade Dragon, typically you're able to fight, especially if you are able to make use of the Nell fodder with edge scales and whatnot. Once again, Duo Alir and Nell are the shining examples for me for Barricade units that can make use of the Micaiah ring, because if things go south and something gets through, then they're able to actually box with whatever comes there, generally speaking, while also giving support for just existing. Duo Alir gets some extra points for having a duo button, Brave, Miracle, and a good status to give out. This criteria is not necessarily set in stone. If you want to forego being a second tank and instead be full support, you could free up the B slot because the anti-warp is in the C slot on Barricade units, and run something like Snag or Link or Ruse or whatever. The world is your oyster there. And then the last criteria for a viable anti-warp Micaiah ring user is being the Gatekeeper unit. And yeah, And I know some people are probably cringing at that, but the fact that his anti-warp resides in the B slot, he has decent support for just existing, and it frees up your C slot to run the myriad of powerful support skills, I think he gets a very strong recommendation in that regard. So yeah, those are my anti-warp Micaiah ring suggestions. Let's move on to the second category. So the second type of unit that I want to bring attention to is the staff unit with high value effects and also innate warping. And the first example I have is, to nobody's surprise, Legendary Sakura, one of the most ridiculous units ever made. She comes with Ice Lock, pretty much the best supportive skill a staff unit can have, while also having Call to Serve for true damage support and neutralize foes bonuses during combat, which is really, really nice. And then Salvage is Salvage, and we all know what that does. It's a free anti-Kanto control, hit and run dopamine, right? It's just stupid. There's literally no counterplay to this right now, so smoke them if you got them, I guess. But she also gives out attack speed +6 and adjacent warping within 2 to allies within 2. So that's okay. Not the best warping, but it's serviceable for what we want to do with this unit. And then obviously her C slot giving, you know, stats, true damage, flat DR, special jump. It's stupid. Like, she's a really good support unit just out of the box. But when you add the Micaiah ring to her, it's just icing on the cake, and I'll show you why. So hopping into the game, you might think that running the Micaiah ring on a cleric with Ice Lock or Magic Shield, whatever, is counterintuitive for two reasons. One, Magic Shield and Ice Lock specifically automatically refresh your character if you use them from turn 2, and then every other turn after that, right? And then the drawback of the Micaiah ring is that you inflict isolation on yourself, but also if you're a ranged unit, you inflict gravity on yourself, basically. If you look at it on paper, it doesn't seem like the trade-off is worth it because you're leaving your cleric kind of dead in the water, seemingly. However, the reason I chose these two specific healers is because they both have warping, on top of having warping support in the case of Sakura, but the characters themselves have warping built into their kit, which circumvents the isolation and the gravity. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about, and this is basically what I've been doing on ARO this week against certain teams that I want to use hit and run against, because that's basically what you want to use Sakura for, is hit and run, because salvage funny. Anyway, you could do something like this, swap a Rooney, and then heal the thing that's going in, which cleanses them, gives them that Call to Serve buff, neutralizes all this stuff so that they have a bunch of stat bonuses, go in, can't kill because Black Knight is very fair and balanced, but let's just assume that I live, and then I can salvage back, swap a Rooney, and then Kanto back, and then we're protected by the ice, we're good. Very, very simple example. But that's something like that. Let's say that things go south and your Sakura is exposed. Like I said, even though you have isolation and gravity inflicted on you from the Micaiah ring, this unit has built-in warping, so you can just still get out. It's that simple. So in my opinion, the consistency and flexibility of running the Micaiah ring on an Ice Lock unit like Sakura and the unit I'm going to mention after this, because of the innate warping to get out of sticky situations, heavily outweighs the comparison of Ice Lock and Magic Shield automatically refreshing you every other turn. Like, being able to do it every turn and then being able to warp out, in my opinion, is better. And also in the case of Ice Lock specifically, the way it works is that you're only able to put out ice if you don't already have ice out. So you can only have one instance of the ice out per turn. That's the basic theory, and this is just an example with Sakura as a hit and run strategy.
I'm the second princess of Illusia.
What? Oh, hell no!
So now I'm going to throw you a curveball that nobody could have predicted. It is Winter Hortensia. I would personally classify this unit as a high-value healer, and I will tell you why, especially with the Micaiah ring. So, at the start of turn, she gives out attack speed +6, Kanto 1, neutralize units' penalties, and this is all to units within 3. So that's very, very solid support. The Kanto 1 and the neutralized penalties are very nice, and being able to give that to within 3 might as well be your whole team if we're talking about ARO. And then, at the start of turn, she also debuffs speed res -7, inflicts panic, inflicts discord, and this is all seeking to the closest target and foes within 3. And most things that seek are to closest foes and within 2. This is within 3, so that might as well be the whole enemy team. And obviously, if we're talking about this in an ARO situation, the enemy team could just have Freyr, or the enemy team could just have Micaiah and fully cleanse it. However, if they don't have that stuff, it's free real estate. But the debuffs are not necessarily why this unit is good in my opinion. It's just icing on the cake. And once again, doing this stuff within 3 is very, very nice. So that's just what this unit does at the start of turn for just existing. All that. And then, when she casts Ice Lock, she heals obviously, but then also applies a visible +6 defense and res, which complements her attack speed +6 from her C slot. She grants foe penalty doubler and -1 special pulse to the target and all allies within 3, by the way. Once again, within 3 is insane, and foe penalty doubler, when you combine that with Panic and Discord, which he also applies, and if you're running it on Anima Season, you have bonus doubler from Tree Man, you can like stack it with so many things, and the amount of stats that you can accrue and the amount of debuffs that you can accrue ends up mattering when it's that much. And obviously the special pulsing is really nice to have if you have a Gale Force team, and just in general, it's really, really good because the game revolves around specials, and it has for the last like year or so. And then of course, since it's Ice Lock, it applies the ice terrain. But the question now is, does all of that outweigh the cons of the Micaiah ring, which once again include isolation and gravity since she's a ranged unit? And the answer is 100%, because this unit, for some reason, also has really good warping. She has unit can move to a space within 2 spaces of any ally within 2. That's that good warping. As a reminder, Sakura, which I just talked about, is only within 1 of allies within 2. This is within 2 of 2. That's huge. So even though you're inflicting isolation and gravity on yourself, you can just get out. This unit does not care about that at all, man. And keep in mind, this is all base kit, by the way. The only other thing that you could really do is add Call to Serve from Sakura, but that is like kind of a whale thing to do, honestly. Like, I'll be honest, but you would still be adding on the neutralize foes bonuses and extra true damage and all that stuff, which complements her already giving out neutralize penalties during combat to her boys. So you have both ends of the spectrum once again, and that would really bring it all home. But base kit, it works perfectly well. So hopping into the game, I once again think that this unit is better for Omni tanks rather than pure offense. I gave an example of stacking bonus doubler with foe penalty doubler with Deerman, so we're just going to keep doing that with an Astra mythic that you can pair with it. That's a tank, so you can just do something, you know, like this, position back, ice lock, and then look at this warp range. Look at this warp range. She can actually hit decently hard too. I mean, she's doing damage to Hector, which is, like, not the worst. She's doing damage to Hector on stones with Haithrun and Rhea support. Like, that's not nothing. And we're not even trying to do damage with her. She just can. But, once again, note the warp range. Note all of the buffs that we have and the cleanse. And also the fact that you can give this unit Canto, which is really, really nice. But with the bonus doubler, the foe penalty doubler, Panic, Discord, all this stuff, if it's able to go off properly and they don't have cleansing, this is a lot of things adding on to each other, making it incredibly difficult to stat check this character, and then making it hard to get in past that. Like if you're talking about an ARO sense, Ice Lock is really broken on ARO because the AI is not very good at dealing with it, unless they have a means of warping past it. So yeah, all the things this unit can do, as far as buffs, debuffs, all of it being within 3 after she does things, setting up the ice, and then also having this insane warp range to circumvent the isolation and gravity from using the Micaiah ring, I think this is a high-value healer, and definitely a good choice if you're going to put it on a cleric. That is my sleeper curveball pick. So to summarize what we want to look for in a staff unit with the Micaiah ring, there are a few things. Number 1, inarguably, you need to have Ice Lock. This is pretty much non-negotiable. Being able to put the ice down stops so many strategies, and especially on ARO, the AI is not the best at dealing with it, and Sigurd basically gets stopped by that if you're running against a Sigurd team. But ice is crazy, and being able to refresh yourself after it every turn instead of every other turn is especially valuable, and you can't set more than 1 set of ice per turn anyway. So yeah. Number 2, have high value buffs or debuffs. So Sakura gives out salvage, which, you know, flat DR, true damage, special jump, you know, everything under the sun, the stupid Canto control ignoring thing. Unit's crazy. As far as debuffs, not that many. But she's still really good for hit and run. A unit like Winter Hortensia, however, at start of turn applies a handful of decent debuffs that seek and spread within 3, which is huge. That's basically the whole enemy team. And then also, when she casts and at start of turn, she gives out buffs to your whole team, basically, because that's also within 3. On top of a cleanse, and on top of the ice, and on top of refreshing, yeah. And number 3, this one's also non-negotiable in my opinion, but you need some form of enhanced mobility, mainly in the form of warping. So Sakura has warping, but not as good as Winter Hortensia. Winter Hortensia has that good warping, where it's within 2 of any ally within 2. So basically, you can just get out of any situation after you refresh yourself, even though you inflicted isolation and gravity on yourself. This is like the most important thing besides having Ice Lock. And that's about it. Really, the most important things are having Ice Lock and warping. Everything else is customizable, so have fun with that.
Peter. The horse is here.
Alright, so I've saved what I consider the most fun style, in my opinion, for last. And that is units that have effects after they move or after Kanto triggers. And thankfully, this is a wide spectrum of things that all do different, unique things, and it's really fun. And I know it's ironic that I say fun, and then this guy is on the screen, but he's going to be the first example. So we're going to hop immediately into a simulation here, because this is once again the most hands-on, interactive strategy that I'm going to show. However, it's very simple. In the case of Elm, his weapon lets him apply undefended on the closest foes within 5 after he acts or after Kanto, right? It's really stupid. However, the one drawback that this unit had before this ring came out, you had to go up here to make sure you're in range of whatever you're trying to snipe, and then you basically have to dance him or reposition him out or whatever. You have to use another resource to get him out. However, now that the Micaiah ring exists, this unit can do something like this. Cleanse everything on the unit that he's trying to support, inflict undefended on the target, and then also refresh himself so that he's able to get out and do whatever he wants, or if the enemy is close, he can box with them, whatever, right? So then Lyn can just do her business, you can stay in your safety fence, no qualms. So with Elm specifically, his one and only weakness was that you had to play around him leaving himself vulnerable to inflict undefended. And now, he doesn't have to worry about any of that, on top of being able to cleanse. And this doesn't have to be swap, it could be reposition, it could be a rally, right? If you don't want to move, it could be smite if you have a more all-in type of unit. It's very flexible, and this week, I admittedly was using it this week on offense. I believe Elm is bonus, and Micaiah is bonus, and then I had Lyn in the extra slot, so I was just able to snipe everything for free. It's very stupid, and I may or may not have taken a bunch of losses on defense for the same reason. So yeah, very strong and straightforward, and kind of sets the tempo for what we're going to be talking about after this. But Elm's not the only mythic on the block that's able to use the Micaiah ring. So somebody like Lumera, who if you're unfamiliar, after she moves or after Kanto, blah blah, she's able to put stones down, but she doesn't just place stones down. She places the stones in 5x5, which is like half the friggin' map, dude. It's a lot. It's kind of insane that she does this in 5x5. The Fallen version does the same thing as well, so if you only have the Fallen version, or if you just use her in the off-season, same strategy applies. Not to mention that she also has support for just existing, where she gives out Omni +4, and Tempo, by the way. Tempo support is still kind of rare. It's weird. She does that. And she randomly can box even with base kit, like she hits like a truck. Even now, you can make her hit like a truck. It's weird. Also, she comes with Ruse 4, which applies very nice debuffs. Guard is kind of a meme, but Schism specifically is very strong, and Discord is middle of the pack. It's alright. But every time you rally, you put down all these stones and apply some debuffs for your boys. With the Micaiah ring, you can do really funny stuff like this. You can rally, inflict Schism and all this stuff on these units, inflict all these stones, you refresh yourself, you cleanse the target, you can go over here, you can warp all the way over here with your peony, place even more stones, and I'm just going to do this for the meme. So, you can go up here, and then place like literally almost the entire map worth of stones. And obviously you don't want to do something this extreme, but this is just to show how many stones that you can put with how many actions you have available because of the Micaiah ring. Up to 3 instances of 5x5 stones is no joke. And once again, I recommend doing this with an Omni tank of some kind. Asker's just here because he's a light mythic, it's whatever. Very, very funny example. Would recommend. So, maintaining the trend of stones, we have Attuned Hector. So if you're unfamiliar, this unit is kind of notorious on defense specifically because he has access to turn 0 terrain. Him and Brave Robin are the only two that actually do this, as far as I can remember. But regardless of that, because we're talking about player control, he does it after he acts or after Kanto, right? And this is only within 2, it's not the biggest range. And while you are giving up your Emblem ring slot to Micaiah, as opposed to something like Erica if you're near save, or Ike if you're far save on Hector, you could even do something like this in Chaos Season where you're only allowed to have 1 save and run like Breath of Life on Hector, which is kind of extra, but if you have it, this is something that people do sometimes, actually, even on defense. But anyway, you might be wondering why I have Bird Lady here, and it's because one of the things her C-slot does is grants 1 extra move to Dragon Beast Infantry and Armor allies. So specifically with Hector, you can move 2 for free, and then set up the stones however you want. Once again, his stones are only within 2, but you're still able to do stuff like this, and basically fill your entire side of the map with stones. Just another example of a stone setter with some synergy with Bird Lady. Alright, so I have one more stone recommendation for you guys, and yes, I am trying to plus 10 the Summer Deer Man. And this comes in the form of fortifications, which if you're unfamiliar, allows you to place stones after you act, only after you've entered combat. So, you're able to do something like this, where you position, you're able to go in, survive, because fortifications units typically are pretty bulky, obviously, but also because when they engage, they have that 10 flat DR from specials. Survive, come back, set up the stones, you dance them, you can get them out of the way some other way, go over here, proc the Micaiah ring, set up more stones, go all the way over here, set up more stones, and then your entire half of the field is set up with stones, you're good to go. Once again, this is not the best example as far as the turn itself, but I'm just showing what's possible, and something on any version of Deerman where fortifications is like a pretty viable A-slot, all things considered. You're able to clean stuff up and then Kanto back and set up the stones for your boys, and in the case of my Deerman, like Breath of Life and whatever. World is your oyster there. I'm just showing that a fortifications engage unit is a decent user of the Micaiah ring.
Oh shit! A rat!
Alright, so the smallest honorable mention in this category goes to the Rat. And the only reason she gets an honorable mention is because she's like the only user of Divine Vein Green. I don't know why it's not called Grass, but okay. But she also uniquely applies her terrain after she acts and then after Kanto. So she does it twice, which leads you to very funny stuff like this. Smite in, set the one thing. Could be any positional skill or rally, it doesn't matter. Move up, doesn't matter. Dance, okay. Go over here, destroy a structure, and then it procs the terrain then, and then after the Kanto again. So this is just another example of a unit that can set an insane amount of terrain because of the Micaiah ring refresh, and in this case it's up to 4, which is kind of hilarious. Now, Divine Vein Grass is not necessarily the best terrain in the world, which is evident by the fact that they never release it outside of this unit. But like I said, this is just an honorable mention, and since she's a mythic and probably a decent amount of people's favorite, it's just there. So, to summarize what we're looking for in this category, we want a meaningful effect that triggers after the unit moves and or after Kanto procs. So in the case of Elm, you have Undefended, and in the case of every other example that I showed, it's some form of terrain. And there are way more effects than the ones that I listed here. This is just the ones that I could think of off the top of my head. So the world is your oyster there, and then you can also add in things like Detect or Ruse or Link or whatever in the B slot, depending on the unit, like Lumera. A lot of flexibility here. This is why it's the most fun. You're able to do really goofy things like fill the entire map with the terrain of your choice, essentially. Or in the case of Elm, patch up his singular weakness of leaving himself vulnerable. And the only other criteria I can even think of for something like this is the unit can also fight, which pretty much every unit that I showed is able to in some capacity if things go south. So yeah, this category is the most lenient because you just need an after action or after canto effect of any kind, of whatever fits into your strategy, and you can just prosper and do it like 3 or 4 times, depending on the unit, while healing and cleansing and refreshing and all this stuff. This is the most flexible category while also being the most interesting, which is a really nice thing to have. This is what I would recommend doing if you're a brain user. And personally, I just love terrain, and I think there's so much design space that they could fill with terrain that they haven't done, like combining terrain and all that stuff. I might make a video on that later, but those were just some examples I could think of off the top of my head. If you can think of any more after action or after canto effects, definitely drop them in the comments for some people to see, because, like I said, there are so many effects like that, especially now that gets more and more common. I like this use for the Micaiah ring a lot. So now we're getting into the honorable mentions. Not going to be that many, but first one, it's going to be Yuri. This is very simple. If you're running him in arena or whatever, you're able to use foul play, cleanse somebody, get them in if they're a hit and run unit, and then position him otherwise. He doesn't have any built-in warping, unfortunately, but Yuri is far and away from a premier nuke even in arena, so giving him some little bit of utility, if he's your bonus, not bad. So honorable mention number 2 goes to Thiazi, who I barely remembered what she did, and she inflicts gravity in the cardinal direction at the start of turn, and after she acts, and after canto. And this is the manual version because I never got this unit, but her B slot is kind of a meme, right? You're not really getting flat DR, you're barely getting anything worthwhile in this B slot except for the Pathfinder and the gravity. I'm not saying it's the best thing you could do, but if you really want to keep her B slot and play into it, this could be a very funny way to just inflict gravity on 3 separate columns. And the last honorable mention actually goes to Duo Shirena. So, if you run the Micaiah ring on her, you could do something like, let me do this first actually. You could like smite in your primary nuke, move on up, or you know, if you have reposition or God forbid pivot, something like that, you could move her forward without consuming her action, and then send in your primary nuke, refresh her, and then either clean up, or you could even smite her again because the refresh from her C slot cleanses the isolation that is inflicted on her from the Micaiah ring. So that's why you're able to smite again, and either get out or clean up or anything. And you can get a very funny amount of actions, and then you proc the duo skill and whatever. You can get a very funny amount of actions with a unit like this. Obviously you're sacrificing some killing power, but it's just a funny honorable mention if she's your favorite and want to try something new. So really quick, as far as defense is concerned, basically the only thing you can do is a rally trap, and this is the setup that I used the last week with the past sisters. And basically, if you put the Micaiah ring on a unit like Camilla, that goes over here, rallies Yunaka because she isn't affected by, I believe, either the plus speed or the plus defense, which is why it's able to go off, and then they fill up the entire range because she gets refreshed, and then they have stupid warping, right? Something like that. But yeah, you would mainly want to use this if you're not running Haith Rune, which is kind of hard to do now that there are 3 of them and 2 of them are blessable and 1 of them is a mythic, Lamau. If you're not running Haith Rune and you don't have that refresh, this is an option. So yeah, that about wraps it up for my Micaiah ring user recommendations. I like making more traditional, real videos like this when they introduce things that open playmaking potential, because it actually allows you to think creatively for once, which we haven't been able to do for a while. But once again, this is by no means a comprehensive list, but that's what I like about this. There's a lot of room for flexibility and creativity with this ring, so if you have any ideas, drop them in the comments. Would love to hear them. But that's going to be it for me today. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you. I'll see you in the next one. If you liked the video and you found anything helpful, definitely leave a like or a comment. Tell me why. If you didn't like it, don't like it. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
What are those Neanderthals up to? Don't they know I'm busy spoiling myself?